What's the best way to highlight self-taught experience on a resume or portfolio?
That's a very good question. Self-taught experience. Again, I think it goes back to kind of what Jason was saying, right? Just getting very detailed about what you actually accomplished. And I know resumes should be kind of short, but again, you just gotta be very detailed. Again, the biggest thing is you just have to make it through the filter. It's a hard way to do it. There's really no one way solution. And the truth is that again, like I said, it's competition, right? Depending on the particular level, as you get more experience, it's probably lesser competition at that standpoint. But again, at the entry level, I'm highlighting the self-taught experience is kind of tough, but you really just need to be able to get to that interview. Once you get to the interview, that's when you can really let loose. Because a lot of times they're going to ask you scenario based questions. Hey, if you were in this scenario, how would you accomplish this particular situation? And you say, oh, easy. Back in the day, when I did this particular captured flag example, I did X, Y, and Z. I use this exploit, I use this, or whatever. So the truth is, the resumes is just to get your foot in the door. But once you get there, that's when you really explode with the actual how you present the information is what I will focus the most on, and you try to blow away your hiring manager. You just have to. Again, it's
Yeah.
tough. It's no easy way to do it, but you just have to get to the manager, and then really let loose.
So I'm going to answer one thing on here as well as a
Yeah.
hiring manager. I will tell you, for those of you who don't know or haven't heard me talk on hiring before, the average hiring manager will look at your resume for between 6 and 60 seconds. So you have less than a minute. Most of the time, you have less than 10 seconds. Now, how quick is 6 seconds? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm on to the next candidate. So that's how much time you have to catch me. If you give me a 5-page resume, I'm not looking at it. I don't have time, right? I'm just being honest here. Generally, as a hiring manager, I'm given between 50 and 100 resumes I have to look through. And by the way, I'm not just a hiring manager. I have a job to do too, right? I have, whatever my real job is. And when I was an IT director, or, I was running a company or an organization that had networks across 6 continents and 1 million end users. So most hiring managers were looking for keywords, and we're scanning. So everything you write should be in bullets, not sentences. I need to be able to read it quickly and scan your resume. I should be looking at the first thing I should be seeing is your summary. What skills do you have and what job are you trying to go for and why are you a good candidate? What benefit are you going to bring to my organization? Where have you worked previously? And then for each place you worked, you should have about 3 bullets. If you've worked there for more than 3 years, you can add 1 more bullet for every 2 years. So if you work for someplace for 5 years, you get 4 bullets, right? And when I'm talking about a bullet, I'm talking about led 500 people in delivering IT service management to 12,000 users, right?
Like military
Or what
bullets.
you get, almost like a military fit rep, right? So
Yeah.
in the military, we have these things called fit reps, which are your yearly evaluations, and they're all bulleted like that. So you got to get used to writing these things in very short, very to the point. When it comes to self-taught, being able to take credit for the things you know is important. No problems there at all. If you're like, hey, I've got experience with Windows Server 2019, I did it in my lab at home, here's all the things I've done with it, awesome. Only thing I'll warn you about is when you're putting down things that are self-certified, basically is what you're saying, hey, I have this experience because I've used this tool. I don't have a course to show it. Just be prepared that anything you write in your resume is fair game for me to ask you about when you're in the room with me. So if you do get to the second stage and you go from the resume to the interview, I'm now going to look at that a little bit closer because I've now decided I'm going to bring you in because I might get 80 to 100 resumes. I'm going to pick out 5 that I like the best. And those are the 5 who are coming in for interviews. And now if I'm looking at it, I'm going to say, so Jamario, you say you have experience with Nmap. Tell me a little bit more about that. And you're like, I've never used Nmap before. I just wrote it down because it was in the job description. Wrong answer, go away, right? So, it's okay to write things down that you've done yourself. But the way I'm going to ask you to prove it is probably going to be in a technical interview. That's most of the time I'm going to say, you're like, hey, I use Metasploit in my lab environment. I've done this, this, and this. Great. Walk me through what that looks like. Tell me how that works. Tell me what kind of commands you run. If you want to do a SYN scan in Nmap, what does that look like? Well, if you write down you're familiar with Nmap, you should know that it's Nmap-SS. And if you don't know that, then guess what? You're lying to me. And now I don't trust you and I want you out of my office, right? And so these are the kind of things you have to think about from a hiring manager's perspective. And then the other thing is, remember, as a hiring manager, you're there to solve my problem, right? My problem is I have a hole in my organization. I have work that needs to get done and I don't have a person to do it. So I'm trying to hire somebody that makes my life easier by having you take over those jobs. And so if that's why a lot of times hiring managers aren't willing to hire somebody without experience, because if you don't have experience, it takes me a lot longer to train you up and bring you up. I'll tell you personally, I've had this problem when I hired somebody like Jamario or somebody like Reed, right? There's not really a place I can go and find people who already know how to do online training like I do. It's not the same as somebody who teaches in a boot camp for 40 hours and talks to you for 8 hours a day. That's a different skill set. And so I specifically didn't want those in-person instructors as my person. And Jamario, for instance, I found that he had actually done some video before because he was doing a YouTube channel. And so that kind of goes like, okay, that's interesting. Even though you've never been an instructor before, you do have some of this video experience. You've been on camera before, and you have some of this IT stuff. And so as I started talking to him, I realized he was a good fit for us, and we brought him in, even though he didn't have experience in this particular job. And so that's kind of, again, going back to my hiring manager hat, he's solving my problem, which is I need more instructors to help teach more things. And even though he didn't have the experience necessarily, I'm able to train him. But now that I hired him on, I have to train him, and it might take me 3 months or 6 months to get him up to 100% to where I am, but it takes a while to train him to there, right? And so that's the same thing. If I bring you in with no experience, I now have to train you, and it's going to take a lot longer. And so on the other side of that is, as a hiring manager, I may pay you less because you have no experience, but I may be willing to take a chance, or I may just not be willing to take a chance on you at all. And those are kind of the two things you'll probably struggle with as a brand new person in this field.